Game of Thrones, Lord of the Rings, and probably others that aren't on TV. Apparently now, fantasy is cool because the normies like it. Of course, watching Dungeons and Dragons and playing Hero Quest as a kid was dorky, and I was to quote unquote grow up, you wizard of eternal virginity, and why don't you cast a spell that stops acne and anal discharge, you vomit generating scrotum massager? Of course, women like this stuff now, so it's cool and fun and sexy and hip. Comic Con style events are definitely improved by the shivering sea of sweet titties that sexily dressed women bring, to be fair. Of course, I have already said of course far too many times. Everyone wants a piece of the fantasy action. Some of them are quite good, and some of them are Percy Jackson. Despite being more into sci-fi, the superior genre, as I will explain in a video one day, I've always liked fantasy worlds. The medieval vibe, the castles, the armour, the battle formations, the horses, the goblins, the dysentery, the funky place names on the maps. So I'm going to try and explain the basic outline of how these work. Characters, for example, often have names that delineate their job or some specific thing about them. Thorin Oakenshield, for instance, is a guy called Thorin, with saucy smouldering looks, who has an oak shield. I like this concept and want to include it and make it clear. Minor characters tend to get name and job together, like, I don't know, Merid the barkeep. Although, something like Jimmy the part-time plumber won't do. They have to be flowery, like Lord of the Rings type stuff, you know, Arnold the anus tattoo master, Indigo the irritable bowel sufferer, Bill the bill writer. No, that's stupid. I regret saying that now. Places, let's go that way, often have a similar vibe. The maps tend to have the good guy areas, then the other people bits like elves and shit. Then far off to one extreme side, the bad guy regions. To one other end is where the blacks or the Latinos live, because they mostly aren't allowed to be in fantasy worlds for some reason. But generally the names tend to give you an idea of what's happening nearby. The capital of the human civilization should have some overtly heroic and noble name, like Noble Hero Town, ruled by a kind, gentle, beautiful man with flowing locks and the exact right amount of stubble, just enough to look dangerous in an alley fight, but not so much that he gets chicken bits stuck on his face every day. You'll need plenty of gentle sounding places near the main human settlements, the Forest of Love, the River of Pleasant Back Scratching, the 5 Fjords of Finger Insertion. Your classic English summer landscapes, lots of flowers, trees, butterflies, the occasional giant crab. Basically, where you would fight level 1 and 2 critters in an RPG to start out your new build. Maybe you craft your first shield made entirely out of bear toenails. So anyway, you leave this soft, comforting land, march up Red Panda Road past Cuddle Grove and the Cave of Baby's Laughter. Then you're heading into the thick, lumpy soup that is the other races. Except for Game of Thrones, there is always a couple of non-human species sullying our lands before we get there with their stinking xeno-scum feet and weirdly shaped ears. If it is elves, of course, and it usually is because that Tolkien guy is the only one Andy cares about. Then they'll have those soft, hippie sounding place names where everything sounds like a combination of French and running water. You know, like Luther Lela and Lorionhon and Lotharian and L'Oreal and so on. Lots of apostrophes and shit, y'all. Very close to them, but not too close, will be the third major race, normally dwarves for some reason. On any good fantasy map, just as you have forests with funny names and living trees and rodents of unusual size, you must also have colossal mountain ranges that dominate the skyline, but also hide an entire civilization of short, fat, suspiciously Scottish looking men that all have beards. I'd be more on board with mountain people, personally, if they were all grey, stunted mole people with huge eyes for capturing the little light available, or hideous hell goblins with fingers like spider legs. They'll have some dwarven, sharp-sounding name like, I don't know, Kazakhstan. But regardless, having a huge mountain range on your map is tactically important for the battles, but limits the amount of weird village names you'll need. Instead of having like a sea of 4 hut villages like Old Man Stop and the Ebola Drome and Whispering Ale and Chevy's Auto Parts, you can just have the mountains of perpetual cloudy moisture and random albatross attacks. The basic nice areas of the map are separated from the darker places on the map by something. In our case, we'll use a desert. Deserts aren't actually that common in fantasy, to be fair, partly because it's just sand and shit, and partly because you'd basically be making Arabs and that would appear racist to modern viewers. A solid high quality fantasy desert must have only one overriding name that makes it clear that you cannot ever cross. Don't even try to cross it, don't think about crossing it, but leave just enough hint of something fun somewhere on the other side or within to make it worthy of one main questline. The gold sea of endless heat, the scorched earth with one oasis, the land that time forgot with that one suspicious cave in the middle that might have treasure, or some level 200 mega boss that will turn your insides into 1,000 island dressing. You may have subsections of this map filler such as the Godless Stretch, the Devil's Eye Sea, or the section with giant spice worms in it from that film that time. Beyond the desert wasteland, far away from the idyllic vision of a noble European kingdom that has airbrushed away all the slavery, the peasants, the inbreeding, the lack of tropical fruits and so on, you may find yourself in the far-off place that is only spoken about in legends but will suspiciously turn out to be super relevant to the main plot. A land of prophecy, mystery, sexy women in weird outfits. China, basically. The kind of place the all-powerful MacGuffin of destiny must be found before you end the big threat to the world. A place of castles that look slightly different to our castles. They will all speak some strange foreign tongue, but one member and only one member of their society will join your raid group because he also needs that loot. After, of course, you have won over his tribe by breaking the spines of a rival gang or stealing the hot pot recipe from his ex-wife for some other busy work like collecting 15 eyeballs. Also remember to have on your map someplace the mysterious islands that people will never visit because of an ancient prophecy that states some nonsense justification for the writer to tease people about the place but never actually send characters there. Lo, and on the 9th turn of the moons, the ruler of all places and times commanded thus: never visit to the land of the east, the place of many sexy ninjas and gigantic lizards. The old gods warneth of terrible perils, such as sexual harassment on trains on a regular basis. At either the top or the bottom of the map is where shit goes south, or north in the case of Game of Thrones. Lands of lava, black and grey colour schemes, basically any Xbox 360 first person shooter. This is where everything gets super deliciously evil. There will be a couple of good regions here. The land of eternal misery, the home of wraiths who will snatch your scrotums and make scrotum hats for their pet gerbils, which are also evil gerbils. Eye Gouge Plain, the place of no returns policy, and so on and so on. The basic desolate landscapes here will be mostly filled with creatures, animated skeletons walking around in small groups, perhaps doing an evil version of your quest, just trying to recruit some skeletons and evil snake people into their fun gang for a trip to the Mushroom Kingdom or whatever before you stomp in and hate murder everybody. The names tend to be super blunt. You know, good guys' places have like Hero's Cliff or whatever, whereas the bad guy version of the same mountain will be the Drop of Death, whose second album was the best, I believe. The actual home area of the super big bad will be the worst looking shithole ever in general, with the exception of the Dark Lord or whatever's personal domicile, which will be an astonishing edifice to the Supreme Leader's girth, clothing style, obsession with bone and skin based furniture, a gratuitous display of wealth and sexual prowess, the leader himself or herself, if we are playing the game of pretend women can compete with men on an equal footing, will almost certainly be a dinosauric example of cartoonish bigness and patchy vintage clothing. The leader will have a pet of some sort, but it's an evil pet because you can't humanise the overlord of sexy evil, so it will be like a bear with red eyes, or a falcon that's an alcoholic, or a turtle, but a turtle that really hates Spanish people and both its front legs are made entirely of wasps. Unlike the mutated shambles living in the miles of wasteland outside, he'll have a smartly dressed array of personal attendants. There may be eyeless creep monsters with faces that look like staplers, but they all look respectable and union approved. So that is a basic fantasy map outline. Unfortunately, I have the artistic hand of a Parkinson's sufferer on a treadmill during an earthquake, so you'll mostly have to imagine the things I'm talking about in map form. Just picture the Earth as it naturally is, i.e. flat, but instead of, say, Brazil, you might have the nation of skeletons, and where London is, you would instead find the home of true evil and debauchery, a dark land where the laws of physics no longer apply, where matter and creatures alike shift and change at the whims of merciless, unknowable god beings, and the entire realm is cast under the blackest clouds and the skies are thick with tar-winged wyverns hunting for soft humid flesh. We'll call it Hell. You thought I was going to say London again, didn't you, old boy, as some kind of jape? I was. But it's slightly predictable. Plus, London's fine. From a distance.